We are Melungeon. We are Melungeon.
Okay, hello and welcome everyone to episode 5 of season 6 of the Melungeon Voices podcast. We have with us today Dr. Latanya Bowman and Dr. Kirsten Priest. We will be discussing the significance of the Jamestown Freedom Pioneers on abolitionism and the Underground Railroad from the American Revolution through to the American Civil War. As always, I am your host, Heather Angelina, president of the Melungeon Heritage Association, and with me, my co-host, Brooke Gibbons. Brooke, how are you?
I'm doing so well, Heather. I wanted to tell you about last month's episode with Marvin Jones. He had mentioned on New Year's Eve he was listening to Hot Jazz New Year's Eve, which is a part of, I found out, Hot Jazz Saturday Night through the American University in Washington, D.C. And even though we're down here in Charlotte, I was able to find it and stream Hot Jazz Saturday Night. So I'm very happy to be listening to older jazz with my husband through the American University in Washington. It's actually their NPR station up there. So thank you, Internet and Marvin Jones for
Yes, thank you,
yeah.
Marvin. Shout out to Marvin.
So I'm so happy to be. It's just so fun. It's like 20s, 30s, 40s, old jazz, swing music. It's super fun to listen to. And I think it's like every Saturday or every other Saturday night.
Oh, get out. Well,
Mhm.
I need to check that out.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love jazz. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
that's
can just stream
fantastic.
it right through the American University's public radio station. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that is good to know. So let's get to it. I'd like to start off, first of all, um, with you ladies telling us a little bit about yourselves, and also how you two met. And we'll start with you, Latanya.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Well, my name is Dr. Latanya Bowman. I'm actually a chiropractic physician. So I practice in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. But I was raised in High Point and Jamestown, North Carolina. So that's where my mother's family is originated from, and that's who are the descendants that we'll be speaking on today. I met Dr. Priest through one of the relatives in Indiana, Miss Norma Johnson, who is the genealogist for the Pettiford and Weaver family up in Indiana. So as I started doing my research and doing some digging and went on ancestry.com and did the DNA spit test, and then from there everything started to unfold, and I met her and she helped guided me, and that's how her and I had that light bulb that came on and how everything started to unravel. And Dr. Priest had already been working with the family up in Indiana for several years in regards to some research with her and her husband. And she'll tell you more about that. And that's how the interlinkage happened. And voila, here we are right now.
That's wonderful. And Kirsten?
Well, yeah. So I was coming from the other side of this story, from the Indiana side, and I'm a sociologist. My specialty is in race and religion. And when I moved to Grant County, Indiana, I was working at Indiana Wesleyan University, and my husband, who's an anthropologist, was teaching at a nearby university. And we ended up finding out through our pastor, we were in an interracial church, that there had been this free Black settlement, large, in the county before the Civil War. And he said, go down to the library and check it out. And I went to the library and I was so surprised. Never in my life had I heard about this history. And when I started kind of interviewing some of the elders there, they started saying, we never were slaves. And they would keep saying this. And, we came from North Carolina and we were never slaves. And it never clicked for me until Norma Johnson said, I would like you to go and visit these folks down in North Carolina. They are also very interested in our history, pre Civil War. And I think you'd have a lot to find out. And so that's how I ended up meeting Dr. Bowman.
That is so great. Kirsten, I majored in sociology, so I appreciate you.
Yes.
Big fan of sociology majors over here. You don't see them so much anymore.
Yeah.
Ladies, tell us, who are the Jamestown Freedom Pioneers?
Well, I'll tell it from my side of it because I was actually doing research on the abolitionists that were people of color. And that is the tie in. So basically, what happened, as I discovered, was that you had, prior to the Civil War, folks that were leaving the South, and they were free people of color, and they were going alongside the white abolitionists who also believed in freedom and rights to move up north of the Ohio River. And to put this a little bit into context, what you had basically was people who they understood that the plight of slavery was an issue that was now becoming their problem as well, as you had the Fugitive Act kicking in. And even though they had never been slaves, they had the right to, legal marriage and to the vote and to many other rights, especially property, ownership of property, because some of these folks go all the way back to the Revolutionary War. They had fought for George Washington, and they got resources from the payouts of that. And so these were people who they were beginning to have that same feeling of the impinging of their rights that the slaves were having. Some of their children had been taken and they had to recover them. So they were in danger, but they had this relationship now with Quakers, having moved into the region of Jamestown, North Carolina, and even worshiping there at Deep River Meeting. And so the Pettifords and Weavers and others, they got the vision along with those Quakers that they should move out and they should create settlements of freedom that would be part of the Underground Railroad. And what we've discovered is that that story is much more fully known in regard to white abolitionists. And it's the story of the Black abolitionists, which are free people of color, which are the people that we're going to be talking about today, that we're learning about who they were and what they were doing and how important it was. And I'm going to go ahead and let LaTanya carry on.
The Jamestown Freedom Pioneers, basically you have these families, like Dr. Priest stated, that caravan up north, and she'll get even more in detail as you talk to her. Some of the families stayed in Jamestown. Some of them did leave to go to Indiana. So my set is the ones that actually stayed in Jamestown. And it was very strategic. My side of the family, you had a lot of oral history that was discussed, that was passed down throughout the centuries, where up in Indiana, by the time they got up there, they were able to physically write these documents and information down. By me being from the South, it was dangerous to have documentation and anything written down. So it was hard for us to be able to strategically pinpoint this information, but we knew it was fact. But it almost sounds like something you hear out of a storybook. And so it was hard to believe. And so it was hard for people to believe that this information existed. So once Dr. Priest got involved and was able to connect the two ends of the stick, and anthropologists took the time to look at this information with her and saw this, it is true. So this is probably one of the most well-documented families out there that can show proof that they did assist with the Underground Railroad.
Wow.
And Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. So, and what is important is that other researchers have already looked at the national structure of this. So, in Grant County, we had Frederick Douglass who came and spoke. I mean, very famous abolitionist, right? And these patterns, as we're seeing, as it's part of the national abolitionist movement, even from the East Coast, we're able to plug in the land ownership, because you still have some of these families owning land in the same place and farming it, and you still have the churches there that were part of the abolitionist movement. The AME Church Chapel is still there, and the artifacts exist in the Marion Grant County Museum because these families gave those artifacts to the museum. So we have extensive photos and farm implements and records, handwritten, that you would not normally see. And it ties these people clearly into the larger abolitionist movement, which was led by people like Frederick Douglass and William Paul Quinn, the bishop of the AME Church, who was tied into Levi Coffin down in southern Indiana. Bishop William Paul Quinn, person of color, he's got his 17-acre horse ranch down there, and he's moving people north. And these were the organizers of the movement to create emigration destinations for people moving out of the South prior to the Civil War. So most people don't understand that aspect of what was happening. They're more familiar with like Harriet Tubman's work to move people up into Canada. That was a lot of what was happening, moving people out of the area so they'd be safe, right? But the movement of the settlements, that idea came out of the convention that was convened in 1854 in Cleveland, where you had all these Black abolitionist leaders come together and say, we have to have destinations of freedom. And that's what happened. The North Carolinians, they packed up in caravans, 13 in one caravan with guns. They moved out prior to the Civil War with the idea that they were going to help establish a destination of freedom. And that's what that settlement became in Grant County.
Wow, that is so amazing. And going back, Kirsten, to what you were talking about, free people of color realizing that they weren't safe. Because I do remember reading a lot about Melungeons who were, their children were being kidnapped and sold into slavery. And, so you're right, like free people of color and of mixed ethnicity were not safe. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So for this season's purpose, were there any free people of color, people of mixed ethnicity, like the Melungeon people, and African American abolitionist activity during the American Revolution connected to the Jamestown Freedom Pioneers?
Yes, and this is where you have Dr. Miltier, who has written the book on North Carolina's free people of color, and he has documented this thoroughly in his book, just recently published in the last few years. And what you see is the names of these families that are in Jamestown, they are in that book. And he did the documentation of how some of them were involved in the Revolutionary War. So, for example, Moses Pettiford signed up to defend the country prior to 1812. That was the extending Revolutionary War was into that period. And he was a fourth sergeant in his regiment, ranked 7th out of 78 men. So, people are beginning to publish this, and we can tie into what they have done, which is wonderful. And of course, there were relatives who fought in the Civil War. We have one of the Pettifords, we have his draft papers. So he was being drafted into the Civil War. We also have Enoch Pettiford in Jamestown, who was taken by force to serve for the Southern cause. And as soon as he got out, he made his way up to Grant County. He wanted to leave so that he could have the chance to have education and have a future. There's a lot about him because he ended up in Detroit, Michigan. But yeah, in Grant County, in the graveyard there by the settlement, there are Civil War heroes that were buried there, and they were with the 28th Colored Division in the Civil War.
Is there anything you'd like to share, Latanya?
No, she's spot on. That one thing that our family made sure that we did was to ensure that we allow the anthropologists and the sociologists and anybody with the ISP behind it to pretty much tell our story, so that way it can show that it is vetted and it has been looked at thoroughly. So we're not making any of this information up. And so Dr. Priest knows our families very well. Her and her husband has done a lot of research, and Mr. Forrest Hazel actually will be assisting them pretty soon, who is also an anthropologist himself.
Great. Ladies, what led both of you to discover the connections to North Carolina triracial and free people of color with the Underground Railroad? And can you tell us, why it's important and why it matters?
My family, I was raised in the AME Church at Turner Chapel AME Church in High Point. And right around the corner from that church is one of the Quaker churches, Deep River Friends Meeting. And we would go there once or twice a year, very often. And so growing up, that was just something that was of my norm that I thought was normal until I got into high school and I realized that was not normal, going to a Quaker church and then also attending an AME church. But I remember growing up, my grandmother, basically, she lived in our home. She always told me stories and told me that we had people that was buried at that Quaker church. My family is also attached to the Mendenhalls, which are one of the Quaker abolitionists in Jamestown. The Mendenhall home place still stands as of today. My great-great-grandmother, Mezariah Martin, was actually raised by Judith Mendenhall, who was the daughter of Richard Mendenhall. And Richard Mendenhall's father was James Mendenhall, who founded Jamestown, North Carolina. So we know the Mendenhalls well. My grandmother, even my older cousin, Ruby, still associates with the Quakers often. I am part of the historic Jamestown Society, as well as some of my other family members. With that knowledge, also my family would attend other churches such as Martin's Chapel down in Burlington, North Carolina. At that time, they were not established as of yet as a tribal community, the Occaneechi Band of the Pony Nation. But at that time, we would go there once or twice a year as well for their revivals. So once I started connecting everything and started figuring out what was going on, it started all making sense. It was still kind of hard to believe that the tales that you were hearing were actually true, because you hear these tall tales, but then you start realizing that stuff was actually true. And luckily, my cousin Ruby, she's 92. And my aunt Ida, she's also in her not like 91 or 92. They are some of the oldest living descendants of our family. So they remember so much and they are extremely sharp. So when it came to me starting doing more digging, they were just right on it. They hand me pictures, documents. Ruby's stuff is so well organized that the High Point Library is actually going to take her stuff and archive it after all of this is done, so it doesn't get misplaced. Norma Johnson, who's also the family genealogist up in Indiana, she's working on the same thing. So Dr. Priest will tell you more about that information as well. Yeah, so Dr. Milter, I met him at one of the powwows 2 years ago, and I brought it to his attention what I have found, and even showed him one of the pictures of my family, intermediate family, standing around some of the other family members that were descendants that were up in Indiana. It was hard in disbelief where he was like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "I think I found something, but I don't know what I found yet." And he was like, "Keep me in contact. Let me know what's going on." And I was like, "I don't know what this is, but there's something that I'm trying to figure out and I need help." And this was before I met Dr. Priest. So when she came down, she brought all her stuff, laid everything out, and voila, there it is. Yeah.
It's kind of fun because I ended up meeting Dr. Miltier several years previous when he was still working on his data, and he attended a session at a conference where I was presenting my data on the Grant County families, Pettiford Weavers, and he chatted with me afterward. And what do you know, several years later, here we are, and the story is still unfolding. And it's just, I think he was really amazed to hear that the folks, the Weaver, Pettiford, those people, because the majority of the people in the settlement in Indiana were from North Carolina and from this very specific area of Jamestown. They had over 3,600 acres of farmland up there before the Civil War. You know, they had churches, they had 3 churches, they had a couple of schools, they had a grocer, blacksmiths. They even did horse racing up there. They were like a big attraction for the whole county. I think it's just so amazing. And another piece that I started to understand the importance of was that there was an Indian reserve in the northwest quadrant of the county. And some of the folks that came from North Carolina, part of the reason they wanted to locate in Grant County, and we have that in written record, is that, the Shoecrafts, who were Baptist and Native, heritage, Jerry Shoecraft was a Baptist pastor, and he participated in the Underground Railroad, and also was the pastor to the Native people that were just up the road in the Indian Reserve. And that had been part of their plan, was to be connecting to people who they knew were Native people up in this region of the country.
Wow, how you've connected it all is just amazing. I love this. So,
I was going to tell you that the city of High Point and the town of Jamestown actually presented resolutions for the families, and I was able to bring that to Indiana to the reunion in August, and they were also given to the 3 tribal communities of the Occaneechi, Powawasaponi, and the Nesman Indian Nation to present who these families are. And I know people probably wonder what families we're talking about. Right now we're mentioning about the Pettifords, the Weavers, Evans, Richardsons, Roberts, Jeffries, Carters, Shoecraft, and there's many others. So these families actually collaborated together and started these different caravans migrating up there. So it was a system. And so when Dr. Priest was talking about the Fugitive Slave Act, what had occurred, and basically, I don't know if you all have watched the movie Harriet. I was telling Dr. Priest, a light bulb went off my head when I watched it. It was stating how when the Fugitive Slave Act occurred, how you couldn't travel from the destination from Maryland, for example, going all the way up into Canada. That was like a 600-mile track. And that was really impossible to do physically. So they were having to find other ways of where can these people go. And so that's where they had came up with the idea at that conference of starting these townships. These people had the economic financial means, and we were able to find the documentation. These people were very well off. They were not poor at all. They had the economic means to get up, pack their things, and start these different townships. And they worked with the Quakers. What makes this so unique is that because Jamestown still has those historic locations like the Mendenhall home, it was some other homes up and down the street that are still there, that still exist. And we were able to show that this person lived here and now they moved up there. And we were able to show where these people actually physically lived and the interconnection of them next to the Quakers, where you saw the interchanging of money, you saw the interchanging of court cases, them helping each other. You were showing this proof. So now they can actually say, okay, these folks actually were assisting and working with each other to help with this network. So you had different networks. You had not just the conductors, not just the people that were the holding stations, but you also had the people who also established the settlement. So once they got there, they would have places to dwell and live. So it was a connected network. So this is the first time in history, from what I'm understanding, that they no longer can have it as a theory, but now it's starting to show as fact.
Oh my gosh. That is so interesting. And Latanya, I hear a lot of Melungeon surnames and the names that you had shared with us. And I have some Evans connections, DNA connections. So I know I've got to definitely look more into this too. This is so cool. Kirsten, we've been talking about the Black Farm Settlement and the families that are involved. What is the Black Farm Settlement, and can you tell us a little more about it?
So, a Black Farm Settlement of the sort that we're talking about is a place that was established prior to the Civil War, and as researchers are showing, there were a lot of them. There were a lot, and they had a lot of wealth. These are folks that were free people of color from the South who were with the strategy in place that everyone was talking about for creating safe havens for people leaving the South. They were going and purchasing land. And purchasing land where it was enough that it was not just parcels, but it was a community with a center, with schools where they could teach their children, with churches, with all the things that you need to have an intact community, so that you have more rights. You are actually able to teach your children, the kinds of things you want to teach them. And, these were over 100 that were established before the Civil War. And again, it's the free people of color. If you want to talk about the Melungeon heritage, those people were leaders in that, because you have to have a core membership of people who are safe. They have citizenship. They have full citizenship rights, so that if you have someone coming who is now a freedom seeker, they can come into your community, and we have record of this. The people would give them the name of their family and then incorporate them, sell them land, and they would then have a place to be that was safe to establish a future for their family. So we know John Bolden, he came in as a fugitive, and John Bolden was given the name John Weaver, and they helped him to eventually get land, and he became an upstanding, important citizen in the settlement. So by the time you have the settlement so large that the U.S. Postal Service is going to give it its own post office, they give the little town the name of Weaver because there are so many weavers that are living there. So it's just a fascinating thing how folks had this creative strategy to fight the slaveocracy in the South, which was undermining the freedom of everyone that was a person of color. Yeah, it was a brilliant, brilliant strategy.
I love that. If you all have listened to previous episodes this season, we are hearing the same names over and over. We heard from about the Weavers last episode as well. And I just love the connections and how all of this is, everyone's related, in a way. It's all very similar histories, and it's just amazing to hear all these different perspectives. And Latanya, tell us more about your personal connections to people of mixed ancestry, like the Melungeon people and the free people of color.
Well, I have the Melungeon ancestry mostly well-known, documented within my father's side. My father's side of the family is from Mount Airy and Surry County area of North Carolina and Virginia. So you have Bowman, France, Jessup, Martin, Greenwood. And so with these different families, actually I found a few of them, maybe about, so far I've seen 3, where their death certificates actually list them as Melungeon on the death certificate. Mm-hmm. So at that time, that during those time period, that I wouldn't say that was the most kind word to say during that time period, but now it is used as a positive format for people. These people knew they were of mixed race. A lot of the times they do not know their ancestry of their native communities, but they knew they had some form of blood relations to other families, such as, like what you said, the Evans and the Weavers. And so they see the connection there, but they're still trying to figure out where tribal communities are they related to. But they do know they have some form of Native descent in them, as well as African American and Caucasian. So my family is documented up there. They're very well known. I think at the top of the knob in Mount Airy, there is a plaque where it's looking over near one of near the rock, and it has the school kids, believe it or not, another set of school kids, Dr. Reese, so that they're sitting up there and it's listing all the families, and my families are listed on that. So I think that's really neat to see. With the free people of color from my mother's side, that's the Pettifords and the Weavers and the Evans, and then also the Richardsons and then the Lynch. And then we are tied into the different tribal communities out going eastward because of the fact these genealogy lines go those directions. So I do have family that I do know of that are associated with those tribal communities.
Oh, yes. When you were mentioning the Okanichi Saponi and the Nana Saman. Oh, yeah. There's lots of connections. And just like Brooke said, it's amazing as long as I've been doing this podcast. Yeah. I mean, just finding, we all are just so interconnected. It's wild. So you both have mentioned already the African Methodist Episcopal Church. What instrumental role did the AME play in the abolition movement?
Well, the AME Church was extremely important in the abolition movement, and it really, emerged out of the East Coast, and where you really had an established leadership of abolitionists out in those areas, and they were very vigorous in, moving forward the cause of freedom. And really, the AME Church came out, it was a protest movement, removing themselves out of the white Methodist Church. And they said, we need to have our full rights acknowledged. And so as they moved out of the white Methodist Church, they formed the African Methodist Episcopal and also the African Methodist Zion, which Frederick Douglass was, an ordained preacher in. So when you have Payne and these other leaders organizing, they are organizing for, yes, spiritual reasons. They really believe in the evangelical cause of the Christian faith, but they also recognize that the structure of organization, of denomination, is one which works beautifully for creating networks, and networks where people can commune together, pass information among themselves. They can gather money that can be shared, and it's under the umbrella of a Christian organization, also creating ties to sympathetic Christians of other denominations. The Wesleyans were very radical, and they were there in Jamestown, North Carolina, and those folks down there were connecting with them. And actually, Edmund Pettiford was a member of both the AME and the Wesleyan Church because they were both there in Grant County. But the AME Church under Bishop William Paul Quinn became a powerhouse because 6'5", big man. And I mean, he was someone to be reckoned with, and he knew how to carry himself. And as he went on his evangelistic work as a missionary out across the North, opening up the Northwest Territory, it was with a strategic understanding that it was for freedom of the person, not just their soul. And he was using those churches as the network of the Black Underground Railroad, basically, at this point. And I have to say, Dr. Cheryl Jennifer LaRoche, my lovely anthropologist friend, just published this book last year. And it is The Apostle of Liberation, the AME Bishop Paul Quinn and the Underground Railroad. And this is the most well-documented book out there now of exactly how that network worked. And, the AME were not welcome in North Carolina. The North Carolinians, they could not have these public meetings because it would be seditious after Nat Turner. Those AME churches became established after the Civil War. So it was clear that they were anti-slaveocracy.
That's awesome. So I want to talk about the importance of legacies and continuing legacies, specifically with the Jamestown Freedom Pioneers. Latanya, you had mentioned the oral history that had been passed down through your family. And Kirsten, you talked about, finding documentation online about your DNA. And what we're doing right now is we're recording oral history. And that's so important as time moves forward. We're going to lose some stories. We're going to lose history, and we can't let that happen. And I think I preach this every episode, the importance of continuing history and sharing it for generations to come. So tell us, what is the legacy of the Jamestown Freedom Pioneers? What is it that you want to be shared onto the next generation?
Well, one of the things that I really appreciate about my cousin Ruby Sapp Leach is that she was getting the word out there. She was trying her darndest to get that out there. She would go to libraries, schools, churches, and just try to share as much information that she could. My late mother, at that time, when she was still living, I decided to take it upon myself to just start doing some digging myself, just because I felt like people were not quite understanding what Ruby was trying to say. And I was trying to figure out a different avenue of how to put this out there. So the first thing I did was, okay, let's try to find some paper trails here. So that's where I started doing the ancestry.com information. And then from there, that's where the DNA came involved. And then I had family that assisted me that I met along my journey that we were able to connect all of this information together. Ruby, one of the things that the High Point Library is doing, they have a heritage center. And there they actually have professional genealogists on staff that actually work with families that are wanting to get assistance with their genealogy lines. It's a whole entire room, nothing but books and computers, and they are to assist you. And you can email them, you can call them, and they will help you. And that was one of the things that I really loved about the city of High Point, having that particular program there. And they were extremely, I mean, they are good. They are really, really good. I'm not over exaggerating that. And my Dr. Priest, they are really good. And so when I started presenting this information to them, at first they were like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Is this real? You know, because it's hard to believe because this is one of the things, our information was kept so quiet. Nobody knew that we really existed down there. Even the tribal communities didn't. And so once they started helping me, and then we were able to take the documentation from what we had and then what Norma and them had up there and piece it together. So that oral history is starting to unveil itself. So what the families have decided to do is that we are actually getting ready to start a foundation called the Crossroads Legacy Foundation. So these families that we are just discussing, we're in the process of being able to put this foundation together to collectively be able to hold this information and be able to share it properly and correctly to the public. Because this information is new to the public, we want to make sure that the story is told properly and correctly. You have some people who are still questioning it, but the great part about this is that that's why we have the anthropologists and the sociologists and all of them that are on board that are helping us to show, no, they're not lying. They're telling the truth. This is fact. And we found it. And yes, it's correct. So we have actually applied for a marker for the state of North Carolina. So we are in the process of seeing what happens with that. So hopefully we're getting some green lights with that as well. And Dr. Priest is in the process of putting the essay in the North Carolina Historical Journal. So that will be getting submitted within the next few weeks. So that way other historians and peer review will be able to share it. We have already contacted the Smithsonian Institute, and they have already been interested in the project as well. And so once after all of that gets unveiled, then hopefully the Smithsonian will be interested in taking on and having Dr. Priest do a presentation up there pretty soon too.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's also great to know that there is a full museum exhibit in Marion, Grant County. So in the Marion Museum in Grant County, there's a full exhibit that is the data that we were able to gather and put together from all of the oral histories, from original land plats, from the artifacts that were donated to the library by these families. And so in 2019, when the Pettiford Weaver family had their 100th year family reunion, that library exhibit went live. And it is extensive. Like I say, it's very unusual to have this many artifacts. And that's why other museums are interested in this, because it's so unusual. It's there. It hasn't been taken down. I don't know what will happen in the future, but I think that the city and the county is very proud of their heritage, and their mayor is currently one of the Weaver Pettiford descendants. So we have a lot to celebrate. This legacy is pretty phenomenal.
That is incredible. Oh my gosh, that's just amazing. I wanted to mention, I don't know if either one of you, and you might maybe want to, I don't know, maybe even talk with her or reach out. Back in season 5, episode 4 of the Melungeon Voices podcast, we interviewed Dr. Kimberly Cheek. She has been researching, tribal and mixed ethnic communities, maroon communities, to the Underground Railroad in Virginia and North Carolina. And we had her on, and she was discussing that on the podcast.
I think she teach at Ante University?
Yes.
Yes. I don't know her, but I know of her. Yes,
Okay.
and I remember hearing of that at that time. And that's one of the key components about this. A lot of people know of it, but didn't really have physical proof. And a lot of it was oral history. When I started doing the genealogy lines and the DNA lines, a lot of my highest matches were going up into Indiana and Ohio. My great grandfather used to always tell them that our family went up north somewhere. That was always the saying. Oh, we got more family, but they went up north somewhere. But little did I know that he was standing around his cousins in front of the schoolhouse picture, and that was the set that actually stayed here. But a lot of them did go up north. So when I started finding genealogy lines, and they were going up north towards Indiana and Ohio, and then some into Canada, that's when I started questioning that. And I remember my mom was living at that time. I said, Mom, I said, who do we know in Indiana and Ohio? She said, nobody I know. I said, well, there's some people up there. There's an awful lot of folks. I don't know who these people are. And then she said, I bet you I know who does. And I said, who? She said, ask Ruby. And so when I asked Ruby, Ruby went to her back room, pulled out one of those books that was about that thick. As she'd done her research, she said, is this who you're talking about? And sure enough, that was them. And then I remember telling my Aunt Ida about them. And she was like, oh, yeah. She said, they went up north. And I said, Aunt Ida, I found them. And she was like, you found who? And I was like, I found the rest of the family. She said, you found them where? I said, in Marion, Indiana. And I remember her, she looked at me. I said, I'm telling you the truth. I found them. So when she saw that I had figured out, she was a complete shock. And she's like, your grandfather used to talk about them all the time. But that goes back to what you were saying, Brooke, about the oral history and passing that information down. A lot of this stuff was things I remember when my grandmother would tell me, things from Ruby and Aunt Ida, and even Norma, stuff that people would tell her about the caravans, like the 13 caravans. They knew the exact number of how many wagons had left from here to go up there. So there was 2 caravans. There wasn't just one, and there were several behind it. But coming from Jamestown, there's 2 known caravans. The first one actually had Thomas Weaver on it. Thomas Weaver, his diary is in, I think, in Carthage, Indiana. And he talked about his travels from Guilford County to the Weaver settlement. But believe it or not, Thomas Weaver, his family just lived down the street from the Mendenhall house. So that's where they came from. And so with the help of Sean Rogers, who was the curator of the Mendenhall home place at that time, he was able to distinctly tell us exactly where all these people lived. He is now the head director of the Rockingham, not the library, but the museum, the Rockingham Museum. So he's now the head director of the Rockingham museum now. But if it wasn't for him and he was able to back this information up and vet it, we would not have been able to know where exactly these people lived. So it took a collaborative effort. But the key point of this, it took people that took the time to listen and not brush you off. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And by the way, LaTanya, I think you and I need to exchange shed match numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds
good. Well, LaTanya, Kirsten, is there anything else you would like to share with us?
I was going to say, LaTanya, are you going to say something else?
No, I just appreciate y'all taking the time to listen to us. You all are actually one of the very first interviews that we have where it's strategically talking about these families. So we appreciate you all doing this. A lot of this information I'm not going to say was hidden, but it was not spoken about. And even in books, the books that does discuss these families are the ones that we actually use to assist us in writing that marker. But now those theories are now becoming factual. And so I'm just so grateful for everyone that has assisted us on this project, because it has been extremely hard. It has not been easy. And would I do it again? Probably not, because it was that hard. It was hard. And so because it took your life away. But it was worth it. It was very well worth it. So I want to thank you both for giving us this opportunity.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Well, like I said, I think there's definitely connections with, Melungeon connections. That, like, yeah, that's why I think we need to definitely exchange shed match numbers.
I will send it to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I would like to add, we have really focused in on the people who have been able to give us the oral history, that the folks that are still living, and that has been absolutely vital. Those women in particular are heroes for keeping every record, every object, and treasuring it. But from the standpoint of a sociologist and the anthropologist, the fact that we had original documents that went back to the first people that made those moves, and they recorded those early histories, because the first woman of color to get her high school diploma in Grant County, this was back in the 1880s, she was a member of that settlement, and she wrote an incredible, detailed history. And she did that same work of going and getting the oral histories of all those original pioneers. And I'm telling you, Asenath Peters, artist, my hero, Thomas Pinckney Weaver, my hero, the fact that he wrote about what he did. And that's how we know that they were doing Underground Railroad work. I mean, it's just phenomenal that we have such early records even of this history. And thanks to all of those women and men who have carried on the oral histories, LaTanya's grandfather, those uncles, those aunts, all of those folks that kept on telling the stories. We are so thankful and so grateful.
Yeah, that Thomas, what you see online on his diary online is not all of his journal. The rest of it is in Indiana incarcerated. So there's more to that diary than what you read online. And so it was really neat when Dr. Priest presented me that information, and then we had to take all that stuff to the North Carolina archives for the marker. The stuff was about that thick. She had to mail everything to me on top of the stuff that Ruby had. I had to drive it down there because it was so much stuff. And all of this stuff was like original documentation. And one of the things that the museums were concerned with was the Xeroxing, because when you Xerox something that's old like that, it can fade the ink. But they were okay doing it just because they knew what was happening. So hopefully, once all of this unfolds as a possibility, Weaver might end up being able to apply for an official Underground Railroad marker, which would turn that area into a national landmark.
That is awesome. Yeah, keep
us
us updated. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly, Brooke. Yes.
I'm gonna follow this.
Yeah, this is just great. Oh, I mean, I just, have chills. And being a historian myself, we know the importance of primary resources, as you were saying, Kirsten. Like, yeah, when you have that much primary, that is just incredible. Yeah. Oh, well, I just wanted to thank Dr. Latanya Bowman and Dr. Kirsten Priest for being on our podcast. It was such a pleasure speaking to both of you today. So thank you so much. And just so for our next month, our guest is Sabrina Stowe. She is a music manager, publicist, journalist, and editor. And she will be discussing her mixed ethnic ancestors, Melungeon ancestors who fought in the American Revolution, and also how to submit your Melungeon ancestors or free people of color ancestors to the Daughters of the American Revolution. We also want to thank the VA 250 Commission and the Virginia Humanities for making the grant that made this podcast possible. Thank you again, Latanya and Kirsten, and thank you, Brooke, and we'll see everyone next month.
We've traveled very far. Where we've been is who we are. We are standing proud and strong. We'll use our strength to carry on. We are Melungeon. We are Melungeon. Our voices shouting our stories of our defeats and victories. We're unified, we stand as one. Diversified nation that is finally home. We are Melungeon. We are